Hello everyone, and welcome to the long-awaited video that I am finally able to make. It is going to be the Water Lorraine Balance Allies Aggro, whatever you want to call it, deck tech for Ascent Houston. I did take this to top 32, which I'm super excited about, and I'm really eager to share it with you guys and show you all the cool cards inside of it and the reason I put them in. So we'll just quickly go over our Regalia deck. It is going to be pretty basic. Spirit of Water, Lorraine level 1, Lorraine level 2, and we top out at Lorraine level 3. The very special thing about this is we don't normally force it. It is just for an HP buffer and for additional swords or a card draw if needed. We run 0 Crux cards main deck, so this isn't necessary. And then we have our classic GCR for draw, Drawn Blade for draw, Sword of Seeking, and Ornamental Greatsword to be grabbed from Lorraine 1, Ornamental if you have allies on the field for that early aggression, Sword of Seeking for those pesky Dream Fairies or anything of that nature. Nullifying Lantern main board, just because we can fracturize it, and it helps us against our fire matchup. And we have Warrior's Longsword, just to push in some multiple damage mid-game. And Tariff Ring main board, just because this deck is specifically built to beat aggro variants of decks. I like to have this main board. It really dissuades people from going all out. In addition, it's a great thing to fracturize if I don't need it for that additional fractal, which will be helpful later on. Or it's a great thing to pop before you go into level 2, so then they're stuck with a bunch of allies on the field, and you can level 2 Lorraine with Tidal Sweep just to draw a bunch of cards. And then we run a Prismatic Edge just for our late game finisher if we did get pushed to Crux and we need that extra bit of damage. I find this really good against fire, just because you'll draw a card off your own water reveal and then you get that 3 damage, so it's like a 6 damage tempo swing, which should be enough to close out the game with allies on the field. Now, I forgot to mention at the start of the video, but the reason I took this deck and what it was built for is I was sick and tired of aggro decks. A lot of people in my play group play aggro, and I wanted a deck that can beat it and counter it. So I got to play test a lot against wind allies, against fire erupting lists, against fire ally lists, things of that nature. So a lot of these card choices are specifically for those matchups and tacked against it. And I figured in Ascent people are going to try and want to win their games fast, so I figured everyone was going to be on the aggro strategy. So that was my logic behind taking this deck and those card choices. Now, let's get further into the main deck. So we got Tidal Sweep at 3, and that is just going to be your board clear and that nice floating memory if needed later on. I only ever played Tidal Sweep when I was on level 2 Lorraine. Part of the reason I didn't run 4 is because 4 just felt like too much, 2 felt like not seeing it enough, and 3 was the perfect amount. Then we move over to 3 Fracturize. It was initially at 4, but I cut it down 1 just because I ran out of things to Fracturize, and it felt like a very dead card after that. A lot of the times I will Fracturize my own weapons, my own lantern, things like that, just to get those additional fractals to help me with balance math or to allow me to get that floating memory in. One thing about Fracturize that is really cool, especially if you have a Gildus on board, is if you have a weapon, you can swing with it, and then you can Fracturize it by paying 2 and then getting Fracturize out of your hand, and that turns into a Fractal untapped, which then you can tap that and then put like 1 down to help your balance if you have that extra card in hand. So it's technically like a 1-drop for balance mechanics if you hit your own Regalia. Other than that, of course you hit the stapled stuff that other people are playing, and I'm not really concerned of giving them more reservables because I'm going to be aggroing them down. Their resources won't matter in the end. We have Chilling Touch just for the floating memory and to help slow down some deck strategies. Other than that, the card's alright. We do have Refracting Missiles in here. This was meant to be my blue fireball, just because I do play a lot of fractals in this deck, and I can create more fractals on my own board. It was meant to be like my late game spell damage, get you. It didn't really end up that way. I mostly ended up using this for removal. A lot of the times, if someone would play an Ascent Protector, I would kill on activation whatever they were thinking about bouncing, so it would have to bounce itself. Or this was really good, like Gildas Remover, killed Arthurs a lot of the time, Hasty Messengers, things like that. So I'm happy with the card, it just didn't do what I was expecting it to do. But the fast floating memory is very nice, helps me get around Merlin locks, things like that as well. And then we have Frostborn Paladin, which I think is a really good card. It doesn't always perform as well as I want it to do, but a 3-mana 2/3 with Intercept is just good in my opinion, so that's still worth running. If I do have that floating memory to spare, if I didn't get Raccooned or Merlined, I would usually have it enter, and a 3/4 is very hard for some decks to deal with, and I usually just swing with it, because 3 damage is decent enough to start putting a clock. In this deck, you are the aggro/tempo deck, so you really want to keep putting pressure on your opponent, and you never want to have more damage taken than you have given. There's no healing in this deck. And we'll get to that later, but yeah, you always want to keep putting the pressure on your opponent. And then Stalwart Shieldmate, just as I said, you want to preserve your life total because it's very valuable. This is a great way to do it. It forces someone to have to trade into it, or they have to be attacked. It has to be removed before they hit you, so that's damage being saved from you, which is really nice. In addition, it's a 0/2 with floating memory. We'll get to cards later, but this thing does get swinging, and it's really funny having the swing for 1 or 2 damage on a turn. Dungeon Guides. This card probably performed the worst out of a lot of the cards in my deck. I initially had it in there just to help me rush to level 3 if I need that HP boost or additional card draw, but just the stat line itself, a 3-mana 1/3, as compared to Frostborn, it's already -1 attack and has no growth potential. And then the level up, like, I did force myself to level 2 a couple of times, but I couldn't title sweep or anything, so I just got 1 card draw off of it. Definitely would take this out and put in a better ally, just from seeing how I'm playing it. Dungeon Guide's an okay card. I feel like it's kind of overhyped, especially after the rules change of your champions not waking up. Like, it's really good to get you to that level 3 strategy, but if you're not needing it, then this card shouldn't be in the deck, and I learned my lesson. Right side, I was only running 2. Then we have Savage Slash, floating memory, but the big important thing is it's a great attack to clear allies. In this current meta that I was playing in, it was all about board control, and if you can clear your enemy's allies and keep your allies alive, that is what's going to win you the game here. So a lot of the times, if I'm level 1 Lorraine, I have a sword, Savage Slash is a 3 damage attack with that, clears most allies, pesky things, Arthurs, Gildases, Hasty Messengers, things like that, Lurking Assailants. So yeah, very beneficial there. Then we have some ways to force in some more damage with Banner Knights, running 3. If I could redo it, I would definitely run 4. This card performed very well for me, and this is part of the reason that allowed my field mates and other cards to swing in bigger, just because a lot of times I was just on level 2 for the rest of the game. So dropping a Banner Knight with 2 allies and a sword on the field is an additional 3 damage, and I would pay 2 mana for 3 damage any day. This is probably the worst card that performed in my deck, and I'm not going to blame it as the card itself, I'm blaming me as the deck creator. I only put this card in the deck to kill Gildas, to kill some like pesky targets. It's an 0/2 with Intercept. Problem was, I either drew it early and it didn't do anything because I needed to play bodies on the board, or I drew it late game when I'm already level 2, but at that point I have the pressure and the way to win, and I didn't really need to remove anything with it. So I really would have preferred this being an ally with an attack stat to help push the narrative better in my favor. Now, we run an additional attack and Riptide Slash. And the reason for that is because Glimpse is very valuable in this deck. You want to make sure you are getting to your targets you want to get to. And in addition, with the on-kill effect of being able to mill a card, it helps you get more floating memory to feed a Frostborn on a turn, or set up for a level up on your next turn. The card was really great. I think if I could, I would probably up it to 3 and put Savage Slash down to 2. just because I feel like the dig will be more valuable than the floating memory in the long run for me. And then we have my favorite card, of course, Frostbind. This was the classic, I'll mess up your Gildas math by you playing Gildas, and I'm going to try and counter it. You either get your Gildas but not in balance, or you lose your Gildas and you can stay in balance. And it meant to disrupt the enemy, nothing more than that. I just love the card. Inspiring Call, this is great paired with your attacks and your swords. It helps pump up your allies, the Shield Knight, Banner Knight, things like that, swing in for more damage. In addition, it replaces itself, so you net even on that card there, thanks to it coming to your memory. And as stated before, with the glimpsing and stuff, you really want to get through your deck faster to get to your key pieces. Speaking of key pieces, we have Gildas, one of the main stars of the show with balance. Card is just very good. I recommend it if people haven't played with this card yet to do so. It's nutty, and balance is not that hard to get. A lot of times I just aimed for getting an odd number of cards in my hand, and with fractals and things like that, it was very easy to set up the balance mechanic. And swinging for 4 on a turn is just, it feels so good. Helps you rush down your opponent. And then our next balance ally, which I initially didn't have in the deck until like 2 weeks before the event, but this card performed so well for me and I really loved it. And I actually want to add like 3 into the deck just because I didn't realize how good it was against matchups. It's a 3 mana 1/1 with balance. You get plus 3 HP. But the important part, and especially since I knew I was playing against aggro, is all allies your opponent controls enter the field rested. If you're able to play this and be in balance, it is very difficult for your opponent to remove it, especially since a lot of players were level 1 Lorraines who would get a sword that swung for 1 damage, and that can't kill her. And so they would play their allies rested, and then I would just trade into those allies on my turn, preventing them from doing anything and just staying in balance. So Lunette, 10 out of 10 card. I'm really happy I got to play with her, and I will definitely keep putting her in water decks. Now we get to our Fractal package. I have Deep Sea Fractal and Fractal of Insight. Deep Sea Fractal was really fun, caught a lot of people off guard, and combos really good with the Insight Fractal. On a turn 1 play, I could play Fractal of Insight, Glimpse 2, find that floating memory, and put it to the bottom. Or, as I always say, always lucky, never punished. Sometimes I would just play Deep Sea Fractal and hit a floating memory for myself. Occasionally hit it for the opponent, but a lot of the times I noticed I would hit a key component for my opponent's card. I would mill Gildases, Ascensions, things like that, which really was a good feeling because opponents weren't expecting it, and I felt like it was a very fun time to try and explain to them that they have to, before they even draw their hand, they have to mill a card. And then we have Tide Diviner. Tide Diviner was an alright card. A lot of the times I cast it, I was level 0 or level 1, but it really didn't have that much of an impact. So if I could redo it, I would replace this with a better statted card. As stated, I was the aggro deck. I wanted to put pressure, and a 4 mana 1/1 just really didn't do that. A lot of times I would swing in for 1 damage, and then they would swing in with a sword and kill it. And it just didn't do as much as I really wanted to. But still a good card, just not a good card in this strategy. And then to catch people off guard, I did run 2 main deck water barriers. Previously stated, it's all about preserving HP, and this is a great way to do it. People will be like fiery momentuming or rending flames, or even like an early game fireball. If you have that water barrier, it really shuts down that momentum swing and stops them from setting up that kill turn on you. So that is the main deck. Let's go to the sideboard here. And on the sideboard, I have 1 additional water barrier, and that is against for those fire decks like Fire Merlin, Erupting decks, and Fire Rye. When it comes to sideboarding against those decks, I would take out Tide Diviners a lot of the time to put in the water barrier, and that's the reason why I realized Tide Diviners could be changed out for something else. I also am running 3 Resolute Stands. That is really good against the aggro matchup. Against aggro, I would side out my Frostbinder Apostles and Tide Diviners, adding in Resolute Stands. I do have a Crimson Protective Trinket and an Azure Protective Trinket. The Azure one is redundant since I do run Nullifying Lantern mainboard. I barely brought this in. If I did though, I would take out either like a Terrafring or a Prismatic Edge and put it in just to try and snipe some floating memory out. But the Crimson came in clutch against Wind allies. It was really fun to starve them from resources. So that one was really good. And then Fast Cure was against fire decks a lot of the time, or decks that drew water mirrors just for that little bit of heal and that floating memory. Once again, when it came to sideboarding, I would sideboard out Tide Diviners, Frostbinder Apostles, and against Water Merlin and Fire Merlin specifically, I would take out Lunette Frostbinder Priest, just because a lot of times they didn't have those allies, and I wanted a more defensive options against that. But yeah, that is my deck tech for my top 32 Water Ascent list. I appreciate everyone supporting me. I'm really happy I was able to perform this well with this deck, and I want to keep pushing Water further. I feel like I really enjoy the element. I feel like I could take it to be more competitive and things like that, so I will be working on that and planning it, and I hope everyone looks forward to the next video. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.